Chapter 4, Part 2. Root was suddenly cold, like up in the clouds cold. The tiny hairs on the back of her neck and arms seemed big, like Moo's whiskers. More sensitive and purposeful, less human. And then, a flash of words as thought forms. Fear, insecurity, pebble, flying, big, bigger, biggest. How can you have a fear of flying? Biggest. That's your thing, Root belted out. Covering her mouth, she fell onto her side, laughing maniacally at Nips. Her laughter was cut short as another skip scrambled time and spit her out, disoriented. Fella was at the edge of the blanket, barking like mad and looking around frantically, as if he saw phantasms. Big trouble, big trouble, big trouble, she squawked, like a feathery organic car alarm. Really? Root barked. Her concentration permanently scuttled. Game over after all. I swear, I should have left all three of you at home. This is important. It's the historical damn day of the great... A deep, look alive bark came from Fella's diaphragm, and then another until she hushed him. Moo was suddenly on her feet, then reared up on her hind legs, pawing at the air above her, as she hissed and rumbled in first gear. Look, there's nothing there, all right. Quit being so crazy, or no snacks when we get home. I mean it this time, Root threatened. But as she tried to lay down the law, the sky suddenly darkened, a gray carpet rolling out across the partially sunny blues and whites. Root's mood immediately fell, along with the lumens. She shivered as a forceful gust of cold wind swept over them, despite the thick wall of vines. Involuntary cold and gloom were torture for a sun-loving dirt like Root. She hated the cold. What the crags? Root cursed, wanting to be home suddenly. If this was a freak thunderstorm, she couldn't get caught out in the open. Not this intoxicated, no way. She had heard too many stories from girls at school, and Root's mind froze, along with everything else, as a lightning bolt struck a tree just outside her garden. It was so bright she had to fight against being lost in its beauty. Within seconds, the tree became a pillar of brilliant flame, sending her heart racing. Instantly, the only thing Root cared about was keeping her familiars from getting hurt or worse. As quickly as she could under the circumstances, she tossed her cup and Fella's bowl onto the grass. Gathering the four corners of the blanket, she squished it like a dumpling into her pack. Another gust of wind hit, so strong it pushed Root like a game piece across the grass. Shit! Wrong. I was so wrong. Sorry, I didn't see the signs, but we gotta go, kids. Nips didn't need any more prompting and took off with deep, robust flaps as she climbed towards the sparking, angry billows. Fella was right by Root's side, pointing like a weather vane towards home. Moo, uncharacteristically, shot straight into her backpack, yowling at the thought of getting rained on. Root's hands felt heavy and slow compared to her racing mind, as she hurried to put Fella's pack on. Just as she pushed the last black tab into the last plastic buckle, all the herbs Root had taken earlier shifted as one with a soul shield, entering her gut with a jolt. She was ill-prepared for what happened next. A violent rush through space-time found her and Fella outside the oasis, standing at the garden's freezer door. But just as suddenly, she was back in the middle of the oasis, standing up after buckling Fella's pack. No, these were not the typical, manageable time skips she had grown up experiencing. These beauties were sharper cuts in memory, moving in one direction but then a second later, heading in a different one. But, as was usually the case with the 10, with every difficulty came a possible benefit, In this case, it was intense color saturation, so vivid everything seemed hyper-realistic. The superhuman vision made Root feel that any future miscalculations had been removed from her muscle memory. At the same time, her ability to estimate distances, reaction times, and forces required to move seemed assured and almost predetermined. "Thank you, Mom and Harper." Maybe counting her blessings a little too soon. She was suddenly outside her enclosure again. The gate clicked behind them as her mind struggled to maintain any sort of stability. Without the protection of her oasis, Root felt the full strength of the increasing barometric pressure landing on her, but she also felt the weight of a full backpack. Good, at least Moo had actually gotten in. Suddenly, Root felt the sound waves of Nip's warning cries crash into her, like breaking surf from far above. "Danger! Danger!" Scared for her fellow navigator and lifelong friend, Root shot her eyes towards the clouds to ensure Nips was safe. An enormous black spaceship, ringed in an amber glow, was less than 100 feet above her, blocking the sun and causing the storm. Before Root could process what she saw, more lightning arced between the metallic behemoth and the wet ground. She winced from the searing light as the thunderous bass shook every bone in her body. Fella was going crazy, unable to accept that Root wasn't running like hell. That was his thing, after all. Fella threw his front paws onto her butt to motivate his alpha, causing Root to stumble forward. The next lightning bolt struck precisely where they had just been, practically welding the gate door shut as sparks flew off the glowing metal. But by then, Root and Fella were already halfway through the gully, running fearfully in the darkened forest. Then the sky opened up, drenching the foursome as they tried to flee from the waking nightmare.